Millions of Americans are leaving blue states, and the reasons will shock you. Skyrocketing taxes, soaring housing costs, and crushing living expenses are pushing families to pack up and move. Some residents are abandoning their lifelong homes just to survive financially, and the exodus is growing every year. In this video, we reveal the top blue states people are fleeing in 2026, the shocking consequences of this mass departure, and why staying could cost you more than you think. The initial condition: the high-tax, high-service model. The spiral's starting point is a deliberate political and social choice: the high-tax, high-service model of governance. This model, prevalent in states like California, New York, New Jersey, Illinois, and Massachusetts, is defined by a robust social contract where residents pay significantly higher state and local taxes, including progressive income taxes, property taxes, and sales taxes, in exchange for a comprehensive suite of public goods. These goods include top-tier public education systems, extensive social safety nets, well-maintained infrastructure, ambitious environmental regulations, and strong labor protections. For decades, this compact thrived as world-class universities, innovation hubs, and cultural capitals generated immense economic vitality that justified the premium. However, this very success has sown the seeds of strain, as the cost of maintaining this model has escalated, and the burden of funding it falls on a population increasingly sensitive to absolute costs in a mobile, modern economy. The foundational question of the spiral is whether this virtuous cycle of taxation and value can be sustained, when the price of admission reaches a perceived breaking point for a critical mass of residents. The catalyzing force: accelerated selective outmigration. The second stage in the spiral is defined by a specific demographic trend: the accelerated outmigration of middle to upper income households and critically established businesses. This is not a broad, undifferentiated population loss, but a selective drain. Data from the Internal Revenue Service and the U.S. Census Bureau consistently shows that states like New York, California, and Illinois experience a net loss of residents to states like Florida, Texas, Tennessee, and Arizona, and that this migration results in a net loss of adjusted gross income. The definition of selective is key. It often involves retirees on fixed incomes, remote workers freed from geographic ties, and entrepreneurs or businesses seeking lower operational costs. The departure of these groups is not merely a subtraction of bodies, it is a subtraction of capital, entrepreneurial energy, and a disproportionate share of the state's revenue base. This exodus transforms from a steady trickle into a catalyzing force when it reaches a volume that visibly impacts fiscal projections and public perception, creating a sense of momentum that encourages others to consider leaving. The fiscal shock: the erosion of the tax base. The direct consequence of selective outmigration is stage 3, a tangible erosion of the state's tax base. This is defined as a contraction in the aggregate pool of income, property value, and commercial activity from which the state derives its revenue. When a high-earning individual moves from New York to Florida, New York loses that entire state income tax stream permanently. When a corporation relocates its headquarters, the state loses associated business taxes, and the high-salaried executives often follow. They must choose between raising tax rates on the remaining and often less mobile population to maintain revenue, cutting the very public services, schools, parks, transit that define the state's value proposition, or allowing infrastructure and service quality to degrade through attrition. Allowing degradation leads to long-term decline. This fiscal shock is the moment the theoretical spiral becomes operational, as policymakers are left with only bad options, each with the potential to worsen the underlying condition. The reinforcing loop: the psychology of decline. Beyond pure economics, the fourth and perhaps most insidious stage is the emergence of a reinforcing psychological and political loop defined by a pervasive narrative of irreversible decline. As headlines chronicle corporate departures and census-confirmed population loss, a perception takes root among remaining residents and external observers that the state is past its peak. Municipal bond ratings may be downgraded on concerns about long-term solvency, raising borrowing costs for public projects. Politically, the debate can become polarized and paralyzed. Advocates for the high service model may argue for even higher taxes on the remaining wealthy, while critics demand radical austerity, making consensus on practical solutions like housing deregulation impossible to achieve. This environment of pessimism and conflict becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy. The definition of this stage is a shift from managing discrete challenges to battling a pervasive state of crisis, where every policy failure is seen as evidence of the spiral's inevitability and every success as a temporary anomaly. The momentum of the narrative itself begins to drive outcomes, independent of underlying fundamentals. The point of no return. Structural stagnation versus adaptive renewal. The final stage in the discussion of the spiral is the potential endpoint, which bifurcates into two possible definitions. The first is a state of structural stagnation, where the spiral becomes entrenched. In this scenario, the tax base has hollowed out to the point where the state can no longer fund the maintenance of its human and physical capital. Public systems deteriorate, crime and homelessness may rise, and the state becomes disproportionately home to the very wealthy who are insulated from problem, and the very poor who rely on shrinking cabooses, with a vanishing middle class. The ultimate question of the blue state spiral is whether it is a deterministic trap or a severe but surmountable challenge. The evidence suggests states are at a precipice. Avoiding the point of no return requires acknowledging that the compact of the past must be rebuilt on a foundation of affordability and efficiency, proving that a commitment to collective well-being can be sustainably financed in the 21st century. The spiral is not gravity, but it is a very steep hill requiring extraordinary political will and clear-eyed policy to climb. That's the reality of the blue state spiral. High taxes, high exit rates, and a growing wave of Americans seeking better opportunities elsewhere. From financial strain to lifestyle frustrations, these departures reveal just how unsustainable life has become in some of these states. If you're thinking about relocating, or just want the full picture of America's shifting population, this video gave you the inside scoop. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the bell to stay ahead of the trends shaping the nation's future.